Today we are in Hiroshima, the first stop of a 15-day journey across Japan. Before painting the atomic bomb dome, we visit the Peace Memorial Museum to understand the weight of what happened here. Then we return to the river to paint the dome itself. And later we head into the mountains to paint Mitaki there. Okay, so I'm gonna try to limit myself 45 minutes, so I have to be fast, try to not add so much detail. A temple that survived the atomic bomb, in a city that against all odds, rose from its ashes. We landed at Narita Airport. Luckily, our flight had no layovers, so it wasn't too exhausting. By the time we arrived at Tokyo, it was already nighttime. The priority the next day was to visit my favorite art store, Sekaido, in Shinjuku, Tokyo. I needed some art supplies for the upcoming 15 days, so I got a large tube of white gouache, since it's the color you use the most when you paint. I also got a small tube of Prussian blue, a color palette, the one I used the whole trip, and also a new case for the new supplies. We weren't in Tokyo for that long, and during the short time we were there, I couldn't paint because it was raining non-stop. So painting in Tokyo would have to wait until the end of the trip. The next day, we traveled to Hiroshima. We had never been there before, but my brother and my brother-in-law, in different occasions, had strongly recommended this city, especially its historical museum. The journey would begin in Hiroshima, our first stop in the southeast. And then we would travel northwest across the island, making several stops until reaching our final destination, Tokyo. This Japan series includes paintings created over 15 days as we explored many different places, from the most iconic tourist sites to lesser known hidden corners. We took the Shinkansen from Tokyo Station and arrived in Hiroshima after 4 hours. The train itself is a whole new experience. I will definitely tell you more about it in a different video because it's a lot of information, along with the wonders that represent Japan public transportation. We arrived in Hiroshima at night, and there was nothing else to do, so we went to rest. The next morning, my first impression of the city, compared to Tokyo, was that everything felt more open, cleaner, full of trees, full of flowers, and surrounded by trees. There were gardens everywhere, and spring flowers in full bloom. Our first stop of the day, the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum. This museum is located inside the Peace Memorial Park. Both were inaugurated 10 years after the atomic bombing. The main building was designed by architect Tange Kenso. The museum not only represents the catastrophe of the nuclear bomb dropped on August 6, 1945, but also provides information about atomic weapons around the world. It also displays belongings and testimonies from some of the victims, as well as objects that survived. More than 53 million people have visited this museum since its opening. The first thing you see when you enter the museum is what the city looked like before. Hiroshima was an active Japanese city, densely populated, an important military and industrial center, with nearly 245,000 inhabitants. It was a traditional cityscape, mixed with modernity. Street carts, cherry trees, canals near the commercial district of Hachibori. Unfortunately, Hiroshima served as a key military base, and had not been bombed previously, which made it the perfect target. The next room, unrecognizable. Hiroshima reduced to dust, a grey flat wasteland, with only a few surviving structures. One of them, the Genbaku Domu, originally the Prefectural Industrial Promotion Hall. It felt like a nightmare. This oval-shaped room was wrapped in a massive panoramic photograph, making you feel as if you were truly there, immersed in one of the darkest moments in human history. Everyone there stood in silence, imagining the anguish of the people, watching everything they knew had disappeared in 1 second, without understanding how and why. And in the center of the room, a projection showed how the bomb fell, and how it swept the entire city completely away. $140,000 lives lost on August 6, 1945. The museum makes you relive the final moments of many victims. Children, women, men throughout their belongings. Lunch boxes with food still inside, toys, clothes, even a bicycle. There were not only victims, there were people with future and dreams ahead of them. And they were all taken away. And for those who survived, life was not easy either. Many suffered for the rest of their life, or endured slow and painful deaths. What stayed with me the most were drawings made by the survivors, some by children and others from adults, but the experience was the same. How do you capture something so massive, so traumatic, beyond simple words? Art, it's a part of human nature. It's a necessity. These images, even without art skills, color theory, perspective, hit harder than a lot of masterpieces. It's incredible how a child's drawing can transmit such an overwhelming emotion, tearing you apart and bringing you to tears. There were photographs of burnt bodies, people's skin falling off days after the bomb dropped. I had never seen in my life something so disturbing. In the final room, a chronological timeline shows recovered objects, comparisons between Little Boy and Fat Man, and the so-called peace declarations that had been agreed upon. It's terrifying to think that these weapons still exist in greater numbers, only held back by fear of worldwide annihilation. As soon as you exit the museum, you can feel the sunlight in your face. The contrast, it's overwhelming. Since the museum is so dark, it felt like a shock of reality. You realize this is something that happened decades ago, but it remains relevant and it cannot be forgotten. And the worst of it all is that it would happen again. Humanity repeats cycles. History repeats itself over and over. It's not a question of if, but when. The day was beautiful. We walked through the gardens of the museum. There were flowers everywhere, a beautiful river even with fish, and herons, which herons are a symbol of peace in Japan. It was pretty relieving to be there in this park after everything that we experienced in the museum. I bought these 2 sketchbooks for this trip in that Sekaido store. The reason is because I wanted to work in 2 different styles, and I was gonna use each sketchbook for one of those styles. One with gouache, which is more opaque, like a painting, and this one with watercolor and ink, more inspired in the Japanese type of painting. I'm gonna start using this new sketchbook that I got from the Tokyo Sekaido store. This is not cotton. It's like a really good mixed media paper. It's cold press. So let's test the paper out. It has a pretty nice texture. Really like the paper. It's pretty. It feels almost like cotton paper. But I don't think it's cotton paper. It doesn't say anything on the envelope. So let's check the paper out. So I'm using this thing, view catcher, to find the composition. It's really, really useful. In Japan, they always add these like graphic for the properties of the paper. I'll need to translate it because I don't know what it says, but I find it pretty interesting. Holbein, I really like this brand. The first thing I like to do is to set up the boundaries for the image. So using the viewfinder, I'm seeing where the building ends and where it starts over here. So I just leave some space, and then I'm not trying to think so much about perspective, and I'm just like filling up the space with shapes. There were many tourists at that site. It was funny because they were taking photos and they were trying to pick on what I was doing. I was pretty nervous for this painting. It was the first one for this trip. Normally I don't really add people, but I think I'm gonna add them now so I can add some elements of scale to the drawing. I think I might do it in ink with watercolor. I'm not sure yet. Let's see how this evolves. And then I realized my first mistake. The water reservoir on my brush was empty. Neither of us, me and my wife, had a bottle of plain water. We only had the tea. And there were no restrooms around, which is weird because in Japan there's restrooms everywhere. In front of us, we had the river. We thought maybe we could grab a little bit of water from the river. While I was doing the drawing, my wife tried to reach the river and get some water. She didn't realize there was like a thick layer of slime or algae or something on the steps to reach the river. So she slipped and hit her hip and shoulder pretty hard. Her injury became like a bruise the size of an apple. It was like a black apple. And it actually bothered her for the rest of the trip. In the center of the park, there's an arch monument dedicated to all the victims and their eternal rest. And in the distance across the river, you can clearly see the Genbaku Domu, blending the living beauty of the park with the dark past of the site. The building was designed by Czech architect Jan Letzel, completed in 1915, and it has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1996. The hypocenter of the bomb was only 150 meters away horizontally from this place. It remains as a symbol of nuclear devastation and hope for peace. After finishing that painting, it was time for the last stop of the day, Mitaki-dera. One of the things I love the most about Japan, and one of the reasons that it inspired this trip in the first place, or visiting Japan, are the temples, the mountains, and everything in between. There was one of these places not so far away from the city, with historical relevance connected to Hiroshima's tragedy. It sounded like the perfect place to paint the second painting. When we arrived, I washed my hands as a sign of respect. In Japan, people wash their hands and often their mouths at temples and shrines in a ritual called temisu or chosu, not for hygiene reasons, but for spiritual purification. Upon entering, there was this map showing all the structures on the temple complex. Some of them, the Shoshin Cannon Hall, the Bell Tower, the Inari Shrine, the Sanki Gongen Hall, and the Shinju Hall, survived the damage from the blast. Unfortunately, they were about to close, because we arrived a little bit late. In Japan, these places normally closed early. But at the same time, there was an advantage. The place was almost completely empty. I had 1 hour. I would have loved to explore more of the complex, but my mission here was to paint, so I went straight into the temple that I wanted to paint. There were some Japanese maple trees with really bright red leaves, which surprised me because I thought these trees on spring were actually green. What I learned is that some leaves can sometimes actually be red or colorful as protection against UV rays. It's not the same red that they turn in autumn. As we walked upward, we could see some structures hidden in between the forest. There were carved stones all along the path, accompanying you on your way up. There's a balance between wild nature and harmony in this place. Sometimes you always see in Japanese gardens. The Tahoto was beautiful. It had these really deep reds that the camera could barely capture. There were a lot of Buddhist carvings from the Heian period. It even houses a Buddha statue inside. The Tahoto, it was pretty elegant. The perfect subject to paint and the first day. I started setting up my materials. I was already pretty tired. This time I would paint in gouache. I began with a sketch. I couldn't fully focus on the magic of this place because I was trying to concentrate so much in the painting. There were so many mosquitoes and I couldn't focus. All I could hear was their buzzing in my ears. What you see on this video, it's only a small part of this place. If you ever played The Legend of Zelda, it feels exactly like this. A temple hidden deep in the forest. There was silence, no visitors. The temple grounds include 3 waterfalls, whose waters are used as offering to the victim of the atomic bomb during Hiroshima's annual peace ceremony, every August 6th. Okay, so I'm gonna try to limit myself 45 minutes. Hopefully I can get something done. It's pretty complicated because the architecture is complicated, so I have to be fast and I have to try to not add so much detail. So let's start the timer. They were about to close. All you could hear was the echo of a small stream running over stones and the occasional bird. There was a moment of frustration because I didn't like how it was turning out. I feel like that almost always happens when I paint, and usually I just keep pushing, and by the end of it, I end up liking it. But this time, the problem was the exhaustion. I was really tired from carrying all day all the gear for painting and filming. The mosquitoes, the hunger, and the time pressure, they were not helping either. The Tahoto in front of me was originally dismantled from the Hiroshima shrine in Wakayama and later relocated here. According to the legend, the temple was founded in the year 809, and it has been long known as Mitaki Cannon. It was lucky to remain almost intact during the atomic bombing, since it is about 3.18 kilometers from the hypocenter.
Pues la neta no está muy bien, viéndolo de lejos.
No one can truly replicate something so painful because we weren't there. All we can do is remember, commemorate the people who suffered, speak about it, and paint about it. I hope that I will never fully understand it, and I don't understand it now. But with this video, I want to honor the memory of all the people who lost their life and suffered in this place. Hiroshima and Nagasaki had experienced something that the world had never seen before. These cities grew from their ashes. I find it incredibly important to visit these places to understand how devastating wars can be and how easily things can escalate. Today, it feels more important than ever. This experience leaves you speechless with a hole in your heart. And the most heartbreaking part is the suffering that children had to endure because of a conflict that they can't even start to understand. In the next episode, we spend our final 2 days in Hiroshima, but we get to see another side of the city, castles, gardens, and how Hiroshima rebuilt itself from its ashes.